question into the Ask a Question box on the console at any time during the presentation. We will address as many of your questions as we can during the live event. The entire webcast is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing. And you can access the replay tomorrow using the same link you used today. And now, onto the webcast. Our presenters today are Scott Becker, Editorial Director of Enterprise Computing Group, and Howard M. Cohen, a Senior Resultant. So we're in great hands today. And with that, I'll pass the time over to Scott and Howard.
Great. Thanks a lot, Raquel. Appreciate it. This is Scott Becker. I'm pleased to have Howard Cohen on with me today. Howard is a longtime contributor to Redmond Channel Partner Magazine. He wrote the Changing the Channel column for us for many years. And, it just seems like the MSP market is always changing, but the change seems like it's even faster these days. So we couldn't be happier to have anybody presenting but you, Howard. So thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And just one real quick note before you get started, Howard, is just be aware of that Q&A section in your console. If you have any questions, as Howard is presenting, he's got a lot of great material today. Just type them in there, and we will get to as many questions as we can in the Q&A portion at the end. Howard, take it away.
Thank you, Scott. Scott is right. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Just by way of introduction, I have been an MSP. I have been in the channel for close to 40 years. About 10 years ago, I broke out, started writing about the channel and writing for the channel. Today, I speak to MSPs and other channel partners all the time, and I continue to be a proponent of the channel, a fan of the channel, and a member of the community. So here's our agenda for today, and you'll see immediately that it's pretty thick. The first thing we're going to do is a complete history of the last 40 years of MSP development. And we'll get, you all have a couple of hours for this, right? So then we're going to go through a number of questions that I think are raised frequently about the MSP market. What I'm not going to cover is how many MSPs there are, what the market of MSP participants is. One of my friends in the industry, another journalist, recently said that depending on who you ask, that number ranges so widely it's embarrassing. Because everybody's an MSP. A lot of people have used the word MSP to mean all kinds of things. I've met staff augmentation players, body shops, that call themselves MSPs, and we all know that that's not what an MSP is about. So I'm going to cover the last 40 years very quickly. The last question, I guess, is the one that we're really trying to answer throughout this entire presentation is, what's next beyond MSP? Where can you grow the business next? And in the course of the presentation, I think you'll see why I think that question is so important. Okay, so let's cover the last 40 years, and we'll try to get it done as close to 40 seconds as possible. Going back into the late 1970s, around 1978, Steve and Steve introduced the Apple computer at the Homebrew Computer Club in Northern California. And that was the first prototype of the first Apple computer. And yes, it is made of wood. A few years later, in 1981, IBM introduced the PC, but they had a rule at IBM that said nobody but IBM can sell IBM. So we weren't allowed to sell IBM. They came up with the idea that they would sell IBM PCs to us, and we would resell them. And so we became resellers, and the channel from them as a manufacturer to one of the aggregators, the early distributors they chose, from them to us as resellers, and then ultimately to a customer became the reseller channel. So if any of you ever wondered how that came about, that was how it did. Early resellers differentiated themselves. I have to share with you that when I started selling IBM PCs, the list margin was 41%. And yes, you actually got your 41% because they all sold at list. It was an amazing time. But then you had to figure out, how do I get people to buy it from me instead of that Sears business center down the block? I was at that time at a Computerland store. And the only way you could do it was by offering additional services on top of it, value-added services. And that's how value-added resellers came to be. You could do installation, delivery, some configuration, some training, all kinds of services, but you always gave them away as additional value, and you didn't charge anything for them because the 41% paid for that. Then, of course, I was at the time, I moved on to a company called the Computer Factory. And those of you who are old enough to remember the Computer Factory will know that we were guilty of starting the downward spiral of discounting. We were one of the early discount shops. We advertised low, rock-bottom prices. And, of course, to compete, everybody else started bringing their prices down, and that's where margins started to evaporate. So now you had no margin coming in, and you were still giving away services, and that wasn't going too well. At about that time, 3Com introduced the first commercial networking products, Ethernet boards, and an Altos box for their server. It was a wonderful time in networking, and everybody was curious as to what this was. And so networking was beginning. This is probably around 1984, the first year of the local area network. Then some resellers started specializing in networking, and there was competition for 3Com. This company, Novell, showed up out of nowhere and started selling a thing called ShareNet, which later on became NetWare. Eventually, and that word's I use that word very loosely, eventually every reseller came around and started offering services that they sold to replace the profit that they weren't making selling products. I say eventually because there are still some resellers that are coming around even now, 40 years later. But you know, that's our market. Some of these resellers changed their title to solution providers, encouraged by Microsoft, because now Microsoft had introduced Windows Server. And so we had 3Com, Novell, Microsoft, and IBM with OS2 all competing for that network business, and we were all busy specializing. Eventually, networks went mainstream, and by the late 1990s, some companies started to monitor those networks and manage those networks for customers, because customers had no idea how to manage them themselves. So we would go out there and we'd say, listen, our network monitoring sees every device on your network. And if one of them goes into fault or has an anomaly, we'll spot it and we'll take care of it. And that was great, but somewhat of a misdirection, because the devices were very reliable. And very seldom did a router or a switch have a problem. More often, it was the circuit provided by a carrier, or there was a power problem. Those were the things we really caught. So our greatest skill was beating up on carriers and threatening them with all kinds of consumer protection action if they didn't get our customers back up and running really soon. There was a bad time, a very bad period, where we came up with something called the Application Solution Provider, the ASP. The idea was, customers shouldn't have their servers and stuff on their own premises. That's ridiculous. They don't know how to run them. So let's put them in professional data centers, and we'll run them for them. The problem was that all that did was increase cost. Now, in addition to the cost of the server and the cost of the storage, there was the cost of the communications between the two locations. And so customers were getting the same service, maybe a little slower, and they had the delight of paying more for it. That didn't go very well. And a lot of people got pretty seriously hurt. There was one element missing, and that element was virtualization. Once there was virtualization, you could put dozens of server instances in each box, and that changed the economics. Now, all of a sudden, you could have one box servicing a few dozen customers, each of those customers paying a percentage of the cost of operating the server and the communications, and for once, this time, the cost came down. The cost came down dramatically, and the quality of the service magically went up. Better service at a lower price. And we called that the cloud. This is where the cloud really entered. Once we had virtualization, we were able to achieve these economies of scale, and cloud became very popular very fast. Who didn't want better service at a lower price? Of course, many of our people were afraid of the cloud. It was like, this is going to replace our business. This is going to kill our server sales. Well, we were right about that. It did kill our server sales. There is no question about that. Anybody who was selling and installing servers and storage saw their business go slowly but surely away. Because who wants to stand up their own servers and storage in their own place when the cloud is so much less expensive? It took a while, but over a period of a few years, cloud became the rule. Server and storage business got smaller and smaller, and infrastructure players today are challenged to figure out how to go forward other than to embrace cloud. So everybody became a managed service provider. This is where our challenge begins today. The managed service provider market has been glutted. And as I said before, people are messing with the description. What is a managed service provider? What does a managed service provider really do? And if you ask 1,000 managed service providers, you'll probably get 1,000 different descriptions, which muddies the water for all of us. And so what we see happening right now, the point in time that we're at right now, is a point at which diversification and specialization are starting to happen. We'll be focusing on that as we go through this presentation. Again, if you have any questions or any points you'd like to add, please go to the Q&A console and enter them in, and Scott and I will be discussing them right after this presentation. So if you ask, what does today's MSP do? There are a lot of ways of answering that. Yeah, we all do network and security monitoring, alerting and actioning of anomalies that go on a customer's network. If we're smart, we do a lot of reporting, and we analyze those reports to help our customers understand what needs to happen next to improve their network performance. We manage that. We administer many networks where we're the ones who add and remove users, or we change rights. Again, that varies. We're constantly trying to improve our customers' networks through automation. The more automation we can add, the more efficient, the more effective, the more productive their networks can be. Some of us include application management, application availability, application performance, application security. We focus in on the applications themselves. There are many managed service providers who go beyond the administration of networks and the management of networks and become part of the C-suite. Virtual CIOs and virtual CTOs. The traditional CTO in a box, although for some of us it seems more like CTO in a bag. Many MSPs will become your entire IT department. And for smaller companies, that's great. That means they have the same, they have parity with major corporations. They have their own IT department. And those who do it well, it's great. Which brings me to a question, now that we know what MSPs do, what's the difference between somebody who's done a great job as an MSP and somebody who's just not making it as an MSP? What is the difference between great MSPs and other MSPs? And first and foremost, the answer is the great MSP knows their costs. I'm deadly serious about this. When I first started writing and consulting, I was astounded by how many MSPs I spoke to that did not know the definition of the term fully burdened cost. Fully burdened cost. When I asked them what their cost of a technician's hour was, they cited me their technician's annual salary divided by 2,088, the apparent number of hours in a year. And that was their cost. And when I asked, what about benefits? What about tools and training? What about travel? What about a place to work? The rent? Electricity? The phone bill? I just got blank stares. And the reality hit me that these people don't know if they're profitable. They go to bed every night hoping they're profitable, and I don't know how you sleep. If your finance department isn't calculating fully burdened cost, you need to have a long talk with them or a short talk with them on their way out the door. You've got to be focused on what your fully burdened cost is. Otherwise, you never know if you're actually profitable. The other thing that the great MSPs focus on is their customer relationships. They're constantly working on them, constantly developing and cultivating them, making their clients friends. Why? If you go back to 2001, 9/11, many customers needed a lot of help really fast, especially on the island of Manhattan. And a lot of resellers jumped into the fray, and the early MSPs, and went out there and helped them greatly. Others didn't make it. Other MSPs disappeared, went out of business. And I'm here to say that I think that the difference between the ones that stayed and the ones that went is that the ones that stayed had great relationships with their customers. They had already developed them well. And so their customers stuck with them. Their customers were there through the thick and the thin, and they succeeded on. We've seen that happen again in 2008 when the economy crashed. And the ones who survived were the ones who had great, strong, powerful customer relationships. If nothing goes wrong on a customer's network for a year, you'll all say, well, that's great. I didn't have any cost. It was pure profit. The problem is you may not get the renewal. You may not have that pure profit or any profit the next year, because as far as the customer is concerned, they paid for nothing. They didn't get anything. If they just see you, if they speak with you, if you ask them how things are going, and you analyze the reports with them, just show some presence, it's amazing, but that renewal becomes easy. So working on the relationship, continuing to stay in touch with your customers, that's key. Also, the great MSP doesn't look at how well the servers perform or the storage perform. I mean, we look at that. We certainly report on that, but they go beyond it. And they're constantly checking to see how well the customers are enjoying their experience. Is the experience consistent between any place and other places? Can I log into the network from anywhere and have the same quality of experience? Is that experience conducive to effective and productive work? These are the things that customers care about. These are the things that customers worry about. So if you're looking to provide value to them, that's what value looks like. So the great MSP goes beyond the monitoring and the management, and they're proactive. These days, proactive isn't even good enough. We went from reactive to proactive and thought, wow, proactive is great. We get out there, we do this preventative maintenance, and we go out and, health check things on a regular basis. The good news for those of us who are in the MSP market today is that artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cognitive technologies have made it possible for us to be predictive. We can extrapolate from what we see going on the network when something is going to go wrong later on down the road. and we can completely preclude it. We can be predictive about error. And that has proven, for those who are doing it, proven to be very powerful. And it's only going to get better. So if you're not doing predictive service yet, consider looking deeply into it and finding yourselves partners who can provide you with the kind of AI support that will allow you to become a predictive MSP. One of the battles that I have fought with many other people who analyze this market is the issue of monthly recurring revenue. I've been to so many, I'm sure you all have, been to so many presentations where the person at the front exhorts you to focus on monthly recurring revenue. MRR, it is everything. You know, it will save your life. It will crack your monthly nut. It will put you in the black. And, you know, is it really true? Is MRR the holy grail? And my answer to that is a question. When do you want to make money? Do you want to make money every month for the next 36 months and then hope to get the renewal and get another 36 months of making a little bit of money at a time and getting so many customers that you're making enough money? I don't know about you. My answer to the question, when do you want to make money, is all the time, always. I want to make money now. I want to make money later. I want to make money much later. So beginning with now, there are services I can sell that will help me make money, which means that MRR is a part of the formula. Yes, having that monthly residual payment is great. And if you can build up a large enough book of business and a large enough community of customers, then you absolutely can make MRR a major part of your business. But to my mind, you cannot live by MRR alone, at least not in the early going. And you shouldn't have to. The fact is that there are many services that your customers need that come in before, during, and after they subscribe to a cloud service. So my suggestion to you is look very closely at wrapping preparatory, deployment, and ongoing support and management services around each of the subscriptions you sell, and sell plenty of subscriptions together. This way you make money before, during, after, and much further after the sale of the subscription itself. And you renew the subscription all the time because your customers constantly see you. Now, you may wonder, what kind of preparatory services is he talking about? Well, the good news is that as was pointed out earlier, you'll be able to get your hands on this deck simply by downloading it, and you'll be able to review this presentation. And I happen to have a list. Here's a simple checklist to start off with. It's not detailed in terms of very specific services, but it's detailed enough in terms of categories of services, like initial consulting. Initial consulting is not something you give away. That ended 10, 20 years ago. Do not do it. Do not shoot yourself in the foot and give away consulting services. The consulting you do is based on years of experience. You've earned those fees. Charge those fees. Take an application inventory. What's out there? What are the workloads that this customer is employing? You know, who's the community? You know, who are the users? How are they grouped? How will their security rights have to be grouped? As you move along, you know, planning the transition. You know, what applications will go cloud? What will have to stay on premise? Workloads, where will they be stored? What can be archived? What kind of capacity is going to be needed? Yes, in the cloud you can scale your capacity as you need to, but you know, you need to get a start and you need to be predictive, and so gather all that information. You do the data migration, you do the archiving, you do the deployment, do all of these things, and think about the fee that's attached to each one of them. So my admonition to you is sit down with your team, put this list in front of them, and devise your plan, your catalog of services that you're going to deliver to this customer up front, during the transition, and for a long time afterward. Best way to build up your MRR is to add more subscriptions, including subscription to your own support services. And then finally, you create the Mobius loop. Mobius is the endless loop. Think of it as a figure eight. And it starts with a project. You get a project to install a new network. You have a customer who's relocating. Or to install a bunch of users, or to provision a cloud service. Well, once that project, maybe a unified communications project, once that project is completed, the residue of that project should be a managed services agreement for you to manage what you implemented. Then, once you're managing it, you're generating reports. And as you generate reports, you're analyzing those reports and coming back to your customer and telling them what you next need to do for them. Basically, you're prescribing the next project. And so you go around the loop and do the next project. And the residue of that project is another managed engagement. So now you're managing that, and the reports tell you what to do next, and another project. And from that, another managed engagement, back and forth and back and forth. And just keep that Mobius loop going and going and going. Projects lead to managed services lead to projects. We talked a little bit before about how MSPs know their costs. Of course, once you know your costs, it should be your mission in life to be reducing your costs. Why? Because there are only two ways to increase your profit. Only two. One is to make more money, and the other one is to reduce your costs. If you're doing both, you're magic. So how are MSPs reducing costs? And the big word there is automation. Smart MSPs are making their services much less people dependent because people are a variable cost. Automation is a fixed cost. Once you've got it and it's in place, it just operates and goes and goes and goes. Now, what are we going to automate? You can automate virtual machines. We've already seen that. You can have virtual machines moving from server box to server box depending on where the capacity lies for them to use. You can shut down server boxes once all the VMs are off them. That's very powerful automation. It saves your customer money too. Automation of clusters. Automation of storage. Provisioning and deprovisioning storage dynamically to save your customers money. Automation of power management, as I said just a moment ago, shutting down servers when they're not needed because all the VMs are accommodated by other servers. Automation of provisioning and configuring. I mean, not for nothing, but you can automate the addition of a new user to a network to the point where you don't have to have a person do that. You can have an automated routine do that, and the user can actually provision themselves. Automation of all administrative services. These days, with microservices and containers becoming the rule, you're going to be automating application operation. And that's very exciting. Microservices and containers were born for applications running in cloud. And so your ability to operate those applications in a very resilient way, very, very powerful inducement for clients. The other thing that's going to be interesting as we move forward is software-defined everything. Software-defined networking, software-defined storage, because now you can take advantage of much lower-priced equipment, but still have the efficiency and the intelligence that has been behind dedicated appliances for the last several years. Software-defined everything is just beginning to really develop, and you're going to see that accelerate over the next few years, so stay close to it. And then finally, there's DevOps and DevSecOps. DevOps and DevSecOps are an amazing way of automating and certainly improving the cost of operations, because now you've got the developers, the security managers, and the operational managers all using similar or same tools, processes, and procedures, which means they work together much more efficiently. They don't step on each other's toes. Everything gets done faster, which means everything gets done less expensively, which is why DevOps is so popular and growing so rapidly. Another way in which many MSPs are reducing their costs is by changing the sales model. The fact is that as much as you scream you can't find good salespeople, some are finding they don't need them. They're finding that the people who operate the center are the best people to talk to customers about the quality of their service because they live it. We're seeing more and more non-salespeople doing a much, much better job of selling than salespeople. We're seeing a lot of owners get much more deeply involved in the sales process, and we're seeing a lot of this sales motion moving to the marketing side of the house, where marketing is moving the sales motion almost to the end zone, which means that it just needs somebody to quickly close. So, again, another way in which MSPs are reducing their operating costs and their costs of sales. I mentioned earlier that at some point or other, everybody has made this transition from reseller to MSP. The question that comes out of that is, what did the successful ones do? Certainly there are some companies that did not make a successful transition from reseller to MSP. And maybe they opened up a pizzeria. I really don't know what they did. But they just couldn't make the transition. In the early days of cloud, we saw that. A lot of people just couldn't make the transition. The ones who did make the transition successfully, and those of you who are still wrestling your way through that transition, recognize quickly that infrastructure business is done. Stick a fork in it. Okay, don't think that you can still make money selling servers, selling storage. It's an uphill battle because somebody's going to sell your customer cloud, and if you're still selling on-prem, they're going to sell you right out of the account. Stop fearing the cloud. Embrace it. Embrace the fact that cloud, there's no mystery to cloud. Cloud simply means that the data center that the servers and storage reside in is not the customer's data center. It's not the customer's network closet. It's another facility, another data center somewhere else. And it's operated by professionals, and it's Halon protected, and it's got umpteen kinds of security, and it's got multiple pipes out to the internet from multiple carriers so that there's tons and tons of redundancy, making sure that they have next to no downtime, that they're truly achieving Six Sigma performance, 0.34 errors per million events. Amazing stuff. That's all cloud is. Another data center. There are no clouds, there are data centers, but we call them cloud. As they made the transition, the successful MSPs didn't kid themselves. They didn't try to be all things to all people. They identified their own core competencies. They figured out what they were best at. And they stayed focused on it, and they established themselves as being really good at that. They did not trash their business model and then start anew. They gradually transitioned from one model to another, adding more and more subscription services, more services wrapped around subscription services, until the point where they didn't worry anymore about product services. And by the way, some of them eliminated product procurement from their portfolio completely. They also figured out that it made no sense to invest heavily in building their own cloud capacity for something that they didn't know whether or not they had a market for. So instead, they bought those services and resold them to their customer, or they brokered their services and enjoyed a commission back from the cloud provider. Once they knew they had that market, some of them started building some functionality of their own because it increased their profitability. They made more money doing it themselves than they could buying and reselling or brokering from someone else. But they proved it to themselves first, which is the intelligent way of making that transition. And by the way, those of you who are happily in the cloud, you can continue doing that. If you're selling cloud services you don't provide yourself, absolutely buy or broker them until you prove you have that market, and then start considering those investments in moving yourself across. Again, coming back to that issue about the importance of the customer relationship, the successful MSPs realized that they had to retain their customers by providing excellent service And they had to expand by getting their existing customers to introduce them to potential new customers. So they focused on new and existing and continued to grow their markets. Those who embraced the idea of the customer relationship and the excellent customer experience were the winners time after time after time. What did those people do? They communicated constantly, stayed in close communication with their customers always. There were no lapses. There were no long, oh, I'm sorry we haven't spoken in 6 months. It's the worst thing you can do. So then, what become the most successful go-to-market strategies? We've already alluded to some of these, and I'll put them all up at one time. As I said before, only two ways to create more revenue. Those are to create new customers and to sell more to existing customers. You need a strategy for each of those. You need to define your target segment. Are you going after smaller companies, mid-market companies, Fortune companies? I'll give you a hint. There's 100 companies in the Fortune 100, 1,500 in the Fortune 1,500, 1,500 companies. There are millions of companies in the mid-market, and they have all the same needs as those larger companies. So, look at that mid-market carefully. A lot of people end up playing there because there's plenty of ground to play in. Once you've defined your target segment, learn their language. Learn how they talk, learn how they think, learn what's of value to them, because as surely as you're sitting here, you will only sell them if you sell them value, the way they define value, not the way you define value. What's valuable to your customer? Listen to your customers carefully when you ask them questions. Listen to their answers. Listen to the words they use. Listen to the phraseology that they use. And make sure that that appears in your marketing. Because if you speak someone's language, they understand you better. That's why content marketing, by the way, has been so successful. When I write for a customer, I try very hard to write in their voice so that they understand me very clearly. Nature marketing just takes that content and continues to feed it out and feed it out and feed it out over time, so the customer gets used to the idea that you are the resource for great information. And when finally something you says resonates with them, they come back to you to talk about it and to engage you to actually do it for them. Many of you have been involved, and by the way, I am talking faster because the clock is starting to erode on us. Retail marketing only works short term. Those of you who have been counseled to send out postcards and do these wonderful little campaigns, they work for a little while. Compared to doing nothing, they're great. But don't kid yourself. Marketing is an ongoing process. It's a discipline, and you have to constantly be contacting that customer, constantly making touch, whether it's an email, a letter, a phone call, a webinar, a gift in the mail. It doesn't matter what it is. You've got to keep on touching that customer so they keep on being aware of you. They recognize your name. Because when an email comes in, there's only two ways you get somebody to open it. They recognize your name, or they are excited by your subject line. Much easier to get them to recognize your name. Going into retention, to retain a customer, best way to do it, quality service. The better your service is, the more responsive your service is, the more engaging your people are, the more you'll retain your customers. It's the best marketing you've got. So those are the two strategies you need. And by the way, turn your customers into your sales force. For some reason, it seems like the word referral is a dirty word to some salespeople. It's something they're afraid to ask for. You must constantly be entreating referrals from your customers. Who else would benefit from my services? If you've done a good job, they'll be thrilled to share you and to show off how they chose you, this great resource. They'll be thrilled to share you with their friends. It's the best and most effective marketing in the world. Take that from a long-time marketer. I've been marketing for 40 years. And there is nothing that I can do that's more effective than a referral. So everything I do is around getting customers to refer you to other customers. Another big question is, how do you differentiate yourself from all others? Again, a very key question. This is the toughest and most important strategy of all. If I were to ask you what's special about you, I would bet you that just as I said it just now, a lot of you said, well, I'm totally committed to customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction is number one with me, and that's great. It is. It's wonderful that you're totally committed to customer satisfaction. So is everybody else. Doesn't make you special. It isn't different. You can say that about almost any company. Any company that stays successful because they're totally committed to customer satisfaction. So that's not a differentiator. It doesn't set you apart. It may be in why you do what you do. That may be what sets you apart. It may be in how you do, the methods you use to do what you do. That may set you apart. It may be in what you do. You may provide a service that almost nobody else provides. I recommend to you, those of you who haven't read him already, take a look at Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. Wonderful book called Start With Why. It's a great education for all of us in this industry. If you start with why you do what you do, the way you do what you do, it's amazing how much your messaging improves, because it's amazing how much better you get at telling your customer why they should work with you. And that's what differentiation is all about. Your specialization is your best differentiation strategy. It's got to be something that can be said of you that cannot be said of your competitors. And it is probably the hardest thing in your life to figure out. It's worth the investment of time to do it. How can you expand your market? By building your services portfolio. You know, you're offering services now. I'm not recommending that you be all things to all people, but start looking for adjacencies. Look for services that would go well with your services. What are you offering now? What network performance options are you offering? What security monitoring, software services? As you look at these are all categories from which you may find other services that you can offer to your customers. Spend control. How many of you offer spend control services to your customers? Well, what could be more important? What could be more important to a customer than what they're spending on IT? So if you're not, look for partners who can help you learn more about spend control that you can then offer to your customers. Capacity management. In the cloud, you only pay for what you use from the time you request it to the time you release it. Figure out your customers that are not releasing resources. Release them for them. Show them what you've done. You're saving them money. Become their hero. Capacity management is a very important service. What predictive and analytic services are you providing? It's becoming more and more viable to predict everything with AI. So start to expand your capabilities with those technologies. And again, the user experience. What about the user experience is already in your portfolio? Study CX. What's the customer's experience? What's the user's experience? Figure out ways in which you can make it better. Advertise those to your customers. And you're now talking about something that a lot of others don't talk about. Most important, figure out what your innovation engine is. What are you doing to come up with the next service and the next service and the next service? Okay. They say you can be all things to all people, but can you? And the answer is yes. You can be all things to all people if you're enormous. Those of you who are with enormous companies, you probably have divisions that touch upon just about every wonderful service in the world. For the rest of us, no, you're going to have to focus on what you do best. But you can still provide all things to all people through partnering. Be very careful about partnering. Vet your partners in advance. But you never have to say no to a customer if you've developed a group of partners that you can turn to for the things you don't do yourself. And start looking around you, because large organizations are starting to offer themselves up as your partner to take care of all the fundamental stuff so that you can focus on your specialty. I'm just going to pop these on because we are very quickly running out of clock. Look again at software vendors. Software vendors' role in your life is changing. I'm calling it ESP, enabling service providers. There are software vendors today who enable service providers. If you go to them, they're not going to ask you to sell their software to your customer. They don't want you to be a reseller. They want you to use their software to serve your customer. You license it, you use it on behalf of your customer, you deliver a service, and by the way, you don't sell the license to the customer, you sell your service to the customer, which happens to have the cost of the software bundled in. These software vendors, these ESP software vendors, can be a very powerful partnership for you in expanding your service portfolio. They can enable you to do things that you've never been able to do before, and they'll provide the training, they'll provide marketing assistance, marketing support, they'll make you a better MSP and a broader MSP than you ever have been, and it's absolutely worth looking for. Again, I'm going to just jump through some of the examples that I've seen out there. Automated migration services, I'm sure you can all think of a few of those. Automated data backup, I'm sure you can think of some data providers who are now enabling you to provide data backup services using their tools. Automated orchestration, you've seen those tools and they're getting better. Automated virtual machine management, System Center itself is a good example of that. Administrative routines, there are tools now that allow you to automate any administrative function imaginable. Directory management, regulatory compliance, there are many tools out there now that help you prepare your customers for their next regulatory audit. And the all popular, etc. More and more of these are hitting the market. Keep your eyes open for them. Keep peeled to my byline because I'll be reporting on them very, very heavily. So what's next beyond MSP? Where can I grow my business? We've already seen the first one, the Cloud Solution Provider Program. You can expect that more and more programs are going to grow up like this, where you can do the things that you're good at and have a larger partner who can do all of the other things for you, so that you don't have to suddenly develop the ability to do them. UC is a perfect example of that. There are plenty of providers out there that you can turn to white label their communication services as your own. Application services, data science. Data science is probably going to be the big business of the next decade. Customers need somebody to interpret all that data and to draw conclusions from all that data. Data scientists are the most expensive people in the market today. And if you're renting those people out, you can be demanding a very substantial fee. Big data collection. Big data became big because we can collect more data. For no other reason. Become the expert at collecting data, at putting the sensors out there and putting all the different devices out there. That's a great example. Internet of Things service providers. Somebody's got to manage all those devices. Somebody's got to hook them up to analytic engines that help customers make use of the information. The IoT is just beginning to show us ways in which we can help customers do better with, premises control devices and so forth. So you may want to become an Internet of Things service provider, or a cognitive AI services provider, or a workflow. Application development is changing. There are interfaces you can use now that are completely icon-driven. You don't have to know any coding. Well, become expert with one of those platforms, and you can be developing applications for your customers without having to ever teach anybody to code. Maybe you want to become that kind of very close to the customer kind of partner. Mobile. Mobile is huge. Soon everybody will be mobile all the time. And so managing mobile has become a specialty unto itself. Then there's security. Security is the big one, the one that everybody talks about. A few people have coined its own acronym, MSSP. And I'm here to say that it may be a danger in becoming an MSSP and pigeonholing yourself that closely. You've all seen this. This is the 7-layer ISO OSI model, the way that data travels through a network, from the physical layer up to the application layer to the user, and then back down again to the other user, and so forth and so on. And every time I teach courses or give presentations on the 7-layer model, somebody said, well, where's security? Where does security fit in the model? And the answer is yes. Security fits everywhere. There is security at every layer of the ISO OSI model. So don't kid yourself. Specializing in security, you're not specializing. You've got to develop skills across the board so you can address security at every level, because security is a chain, and a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You can't afford to have one. So if you're going to become an MSSP, appreciate the full import of that. And remember, the 7-layer model is no longer 7 layers. We've added a political layer to the top of it. What are you going to support? Where's the budget going to come from? And at the bottom, we've added the power layer. How are we going to assure constant, consistent, and clean power to everything, because everything in our network requires it. So finally, we get to our takeaways. And they're real simple. Number one, define your service practice. Make sure that it's easily identifiable, highly differentiable. Describe your services practice so clearly that everyone understands it immediately. Develop a 3rd floor, 5th floor, 10th floor, 30th floor elevator speech so that you can explain your services to anybody in as little amount of time as you're given. Wear your differentiators. Wear them proudly so that people see that you're not like those other guys. You've got a lot more value to offer. And keep that word value bouncing in neon in your brain, because that's what you're all about. You're not selling technology, you're selling value. As I said before, know your costs. Without them, you may find yourself suddenly out of business. Partner strategically. You find partners, get them into place, form strong partnerships, strong agreements, so that you never have to say no to a customer. And constantly make your customers smarter. Hit them with more and more informational content that gets them thinking about what you want them thinking about, and helps them become better at what they do. The better you make them, the better a customer they'll become. Let verticals and applications find you. Don't set out to do research on a vertical and try to equip yourself to be good at it. If you look at your own account base right now and segregate it by market, segregate it by industry, you will find that you already serve some verticals. That there are verticals that I once found that I had 35 retail customers inside my account base. I became a retail vertical instantly because we already knew what to do about it. And then most important, communicate. Always be communicating with your customers. That ends it for my presentation. Scott, do we have any questions?
Howard, we do. Yeah, and thanks. That was a great presentation. And there's a lot of wisdom there. And from the going back to the basics, like that, knowing your fully burdened costs, all the way up to to the now with the ESP software vendors and renting out data scientists. There's a lot there to digest. And we do have some questions in, and I'd like to give you a minute to put some more in. But right now, though, I'm going to read a message from our sponsor, APC by Schneider Electric, who made this presentation possible. Did you know APC by Schneider Electric enables MSPs? They drive recurring revenue streams with EcoStruxure IT for partners. They'll leverage APC by Schneider Electric's multi-tenant cloud-based monitoring solution, providing you with asset visibility, real-time monitoring, and data-driven recommendations to create new hardware, software, and service revenue opportunities. Learn more at www.ecostructureit.com. That's ecostructureit.com, spelling structure with an X. If you're not a partner with APC or you just want to learn more, you can take their software and digital services certification. And to get started on that, there's the URL there, which is apc.com/personal-page. That's apc.com/personal-page. Okay.
Yeah, see, this was just Scott, this was just a clever example of an ESP vendor. They are enabling service providers with EcoStruxure IT for partners. The perfect example of what I was talking about.
Yeah,
really
absolutely. Good. Yeah. Okay. So, actually, so Rob has an interesting question. Came in when you were talking about partners recognizing that infrastructure was over and moving to the cloud. Yes, a really important question, which is, what's your take on private cloud, on-prem cloud technologies? How much market penetration do you see in them? What do you say to that?
Okay, first of all, the definition of private cloud is important there. Back in 2012, when Satya Nadella was in charge of the server division at Microsoft, he introduced Windows Server 2012 as the Cloud OS that you could use to build private clouds. Now, that was curious to people because they thought, well, a private cloud has to be at a cloud provider, right? And the answer is no, it's not. Private cloud is not an indication of where the server is. Private cloud is an indication of whether or not it adheres to the 5 classic characteristics of cloud computing as defined by NIST in their ever-popular document 805. Is it quick release and request of services, self-service, elasticity, etc. I mean, all those characteristics define private cloud. So you can build one and have it sitting in your facility and used by your various personnel and divisions. Or you can go to a service provider who has built one for you, and it's completely segregated off the network for your use only. So, private cloud is not a remote service necessarily, by definition.
Right. Yeah. Good points. There's another. Dan typed in just Office 365 adoption services. I think it's sort of piggybacking on. If I remember correctly, when that comment came in, it was piggybacking on some of the types of services you were mentioning that people can offer now. To build out on their their MSP business. What do you see when you look at Office 365? Obviously, that's such a huge part of the MSP market right now. And a lot of your commentary was a lot more general, but what do you see there as best practices around building Office 365 into an MSP business?
No, I think the best answer to that is that I'm currently coming to you from the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. And across the other end of the building is a gentleman who taught the first Apple sales training I ever went to back in 1981. So that's how far back it was. And it just happenstance that we're both here at the same time. But that Apple training was called Apple Core, Customer-Oriented Retailing. Very clever name. And one of the things it taught you was to extract the need that the customer has and also to extract the need for training. And when we asked, well, why the need for training? Why that in particular? The answer was because not only are you showing that you're interested in making, a complete solution, but also you're interested in making sure that the customer gets total value out of their investment in the technology. And I think that's the same for Office 365. Focus on, again, the users. Training the users to exploit the best features of Office 365. The fact that it's an online service gives it capabilities that you didn't have before. Collaboration. Teach your customers' users how to collaborate more efficiently using these tools. Not just how to use the tools, but how to use them more productively, how to get more out of them. Because there is not, when it comes to something like Office 365, which is a productivity suite, that's what the customer is looking for. They're looking for better productivity, more cost control. So give it to them. Focus on training, focus on ongoing support, focus on making it effortless for them to get support. Use automation as much as you can, but also have people available because people learn best from people. But, you talk about implementation projects like that. It's cited that 75% of implementations like that fail. And the reason they fail is purely because users fail to adopt. User adoption is the most important thing. So if you want to avoid that 75% category, what you've got to do is figure out how to make it easy and palatable for users to adopt, and the best way is training. The more you train them in how to use it, the more you train them to be comfortable with it, the faster they'll adopt, and the likelier it is that you won't be part of that 75%.
Great points. Great points. So we're at the top of the hour there, so I think we're going to have to leave it there. But just a quick reminder that there was a lot of great information in this podcast or this webcast, and including Howard's RAP services. Summary that is a great checklist to take away, and great information from our sponsor APC by Schneider Electric as well. You can get the rebroadcast in 24 hours. It'll be available at the same URL, the recording, and please feel free to share it with anyone who can use this information. But I want to thank you, Howard, for coming on.
Thank you,
Great
Scott.
presentation as always. I want to thank APC for sponsoring this event, and I especially want to thank everybody for joining us for the hour. Thanks, and have a great day.